Hey there, and welcome to the Greyhorn Pagans Podcast. Here we chat with modern-day mystics, occultists, witches and warlocks in an effort to find the secrets laying beyond this mortal realm. Follow us on social media at Greyhorn Pagans or Greyhorn Podcast. Visit our website www.greyhornpagans.com. Make sure to subscribe to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/Greyhorn Pagans for bonus content, a look behind the scenes, and much, much more. Like, share, and subscribe, and let's get into it.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Greyhorn Pagans Podcast. It is my pleasure to be back. It is my pleasure to have you all watching and listening again. For today, I have a first-time guest. I mean, we've been in touch for a bit, always planning to do something, but never actually getting around to doing it. You know how that is. But, first, if you are watching this, we just talked about it a little off air, do please like, share, and subscribe, because, I may have 1,100 and plus subscribers, but the views don't fucking show it. So I don't know what's going on. So please do engage with the video, liking, sharing, subscribing. If you feel like supporting us a little more, there's always the Patreon, patreon.com/GreyhornPagans, or become a channel member. I've got different tiers. I've got something for everyone. Or, simply go to the website, www.greyhornpagans.com, where you can find everything under the same roof, on the same page. Very easy. So, with all that out of the way, welcome to my guest, Ashley from Think, Change, Repeat. I do like that mantra. It's something that we should do more of these days, especially the first part.
Yes, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm very happy to be here with you and finally making this conversation happen. And yeah, my handle was from originally when I first started kind of waking up. I don't even know if it's waking up, but it was my perception of waking up to what was happening with government overreach. And when I kind of became an anarchist and I was thinking about, just we think about things and we change and we repeat. And that's what I want to do as I get new information. And I want to constantly be learning and be living in reality and accepting what we see in front of us, because I see a huge amount of people, as I have been in this space for a while, my feelings have softened towards being very angry at people who are, very pro-government. And we talked about this a little bit before the show, because I think there's a huge control element at place, and that there's been a huge effort in a million different ways to have people joining one side or the other. But the thing that's important to me is that I try to be as living in reality as possible. So I try not to have heroes. I try not to, think that someone is infallible or that they're perfect or always right or whatever. And I try to do that with myself too. So that's where Think, Change, Repeat came from.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that introduction. Thank you for that explanation. Yeah. Hero worship. It's a thing that I'm trying to talk more about. I've done one or two shows about it, and just the constant divide, and especially in these interesting times, let's say, where talking about reality, it seems that reality is ever shifting and we really don't know what is real anymore and what isn't, because one day can just be so incredibly different from the next. I mean, we're about at the the end of the first month of 2026, or 2026 according to this calendar, at least, something that I spoke about recently on the Esoteric Archives. Yes, and esoteric, because they're a bunch of Canucks. So, and like when we thought that like 2025, like shit went down and everyone went a little crazy. Like I said, we're at the end of the first month of 2026. And if anything, it's been ramping up. I never would have thought that, things could get even nuttier, even crazier. But it seems that I was proven wrong. I mean, that'll teach me for daring. It's like things will, never get crazier anyway. It's like, oh, really?
Yes.
Me and my big mouth.
Yeah, I feel like I saw a graphic, and this was during COVID times, but it was basically like your march towards tyranny or complete control of the populace. And it was posed in this, it was like up and down, right? Until you get on a line. And I'm sorry if anyone's just listening, you can't see me or my hand motions, but basically it's these wild swings of we have, this event and the normalization, and then we're back to kind of the new normal. And of course, we heard that term many, many times during 2020. And then it's kind of this continuance of until we get to, in my opinion, where what I refer to as the predator class would like us to go. And so I do think there is a huge effort to normalize a very unnormal living situation for humans. And back to your point about reality, and it feels that it's always changing. I agree with that. And I think that is certainly intentional. And I believe that it is, we're in a choose your own adventure situation, which that sounds more fun than it actually is. But that's what I see as happening. And I saw this stated somewhere after the first ICE shooting that we saw in Minnesota. And someone said, because there were videos of this incident and people were arguing, yes, she was trying to hit him with her car. And people were arguing, obviously he wasn't in danger. He wasn't, whatever. So just taking all of your political beliefs out of that and just looking at the footage and trying to figure out what you actually see. Right. So that's one thing. And then, but people were really choosing to see what they wanted to see. And I saw someone compare this, and you may or may not remember this, but to the very famous dress. Many years ago, there was a photo that went viral, and it was people. Go ahead.
Yeah, like gold or blue, or what was it?
Yes, it was either black and blue or gold and white, depending on the person, right? But clearly, people were looking at the same picture, but they were seeing something completely different. And I thought that was one of the best ways that I saw this situation be described. And that led me to just basically say that this is a choose your own adventure. The people, depending on where their side of the politics fall, is how they are approaching this particular situation. And we're removing any hypocrisy from either side, and that's just how they see it. Of course, when we're looking at it, and if you are somebody who is like studying politics and you consider yourself to be outside of that, especially here in the States, like the two-party paradigm, then you can see that there's a ton of hypocrisy on both sides. For example, the current president, people were, so that he facilitated lockdowns. He facilitated the pandemic in the United States. But a lot of people on that side were a lot more likely to be less freaked out about the pandemic and about, social distancing and masking and vaxxing and all that stuff. And then the other side was, at least the presentation was, that they were very militant about those things. And then we saw, so there was a hypocrisy there. And then we saw the events happening in Israel on October the 7th. And then the people on the right were basically activated. So now they're back to believing everything that the news has to say again, when they spent, 2 or 3 years or however long that was, not believing that. And then people on the left were very supportive of Ukraine. A lot of people on the right were like, this doesn't make sense. Why are you supporting Ukraine? And then there's more nuance to that situation, which they seem to be aware of. Then we have what is happening in the Middle East currently. And then you have some people that are speaking out about that. They're more on the left. And so it's like this pinball of either side showing that they don't have principles of being just anti-war, anti-interventionism, letting people have the the personal autonomy and freedom to mask or not mask and making decisions for yourself. So there's a lot of this hypocrisy that's been brought out on either side, and people don't seem to be aware of it. It's a very bizarre thing to observe. So that is really it. This is a choose your own adventure reality, and that has been intentionally cultivated because it allows for maximum division amongst people. And as we know, especially with the advent and the introduction of the internet, that people are having conversations with each other all over the world. And it truly is representative of globalism in some ways. So I think that what we're seeing is what I was specifically talking about is here in the States, but we see many of these same issues happening in other places, many of these same division type narratives all over the map, however that's presented, but it's there. So I think that, and if we want to get into some predictive programming stuff, and are you familiar with Black Mirror? Have you watched Black Mirror?
I have watched like one season of it. I still need to get back into it. You're actually the second one in a short period of time to mention it. So I guess, I'm going into the night shifts anyway, so, I've got to keep myself busy. Guess I'll watch Black Mirror, but yeah, do continue.
Yeah, so with that show, of course, there's a lot of predictive programming. There's a lot of dark elements about it almost in some ways can present as a warning about this technological world that we're living in. But I believe that to be a tactic. And I'm sure that everyone listening is familiar with that, which is predictive programming, priming the pump. And it makes it a little bit easier to continue to shift that Overton window. Even if it's presented to you as bad or a negative or potential negative, then there's some sort of psychology there that once you have been presented with the idea, it is now less shocking, more palatable to you for whatever reason, simply for you having heard of that, which honestly, that is like black magic, in my opinion, to do that. And we know that a lot of studying of human behavior, even before the internet and cell phones started harvesting and stealing all of our data and adding that to their bullet points in figuring out ways to continue to nudge human behavior. But the show actually has a movie that came out that was, I think it was called Bandersnatch, but it was literally a choose your own adventure. So you would be on Netflix interacting with the movie to go or do whatever you thought the right thing to do was next.
Really?
And I think that's very appropriate. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that was a movie outside of the series, but that's what I feel like we're witnessing. And it's a very strange time to be on this planet. Very honestly, it's very weird.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have definitely, or, if that's something that you believe, our souls have definitely picked a hell of a time to reincarnate here on Earth. But I like to, choose your own adventure. I absolutely agree with that. I think that's put very well. It's very appropriate. And, as with any, kind of game, especially a choose your own adventure game, you can pick for a, exciting adventure with all the good stuff happening as well. It's just a matter of choices, that you make. And I really try to keep that in mind. And I really sometimes try to think back of myself, when I was in my, late teens, early 20s, so many years ago. 34 now, so early 20s for me, that was 14 years ago. That's another thing we can maybe get into. Time feels like it's speeding up because 14 years ago it's no, I was 20. Yeah, that's 14 years ago. Fucking how yeah. But when I had my awakening, if you will, I really, I fell down a black hole. I swallowed the black pill, and I just let it rot me from the inside out, and I got fucking nowhere in life. I was angry. I was depressed. I was like, why should I do anything if there is this, like hard cap on life, this glass ceiling that you'll never fucking break, only if you're allowed to break it. So why would I do anything? Boss makes $1, I make a dime. Why the fuck would I work? But, it really got me nowhere. And that is because of the choices that I made. It was a hell of an adventure, like try and live this life without a job, without a proper income, but with, yourself and someone who lives with you, my girlfriend at the time, to support. That was a hell of an adventure, I can tell you that much. Not a fun one, but it was really as soon as I just at least like turn my mental game around of like, okay, I can keep going on like this and get nowhere, or I can, like remember what I have learned, try to act on it, try to do something with it, but, still live a life. And I think some people are still, too focused on the negative. They're still too focused on, everything's going wrong and the elite this and the elite that. And it's like, no, I mean, yeah, they definitely have their part to play, but you're still making your own choices. You're still seeing what you want to see. Or, there was also this audio thing, Brainstorm or Green Needle, I believe it was. That was incredibly interesting. Like, it was just some auditory thing, and depending, like, it either said Green Needle or Brainstorm. And if you, like, were listening to it while reading Green Needle, it would say Green Needle. And if you were listening to it while reading Brainstorm, it would say Brainstorm. I think that's, another thing of reality and something that I've been kind of getting into. There is no right or wrong. Both things are right. Like, you see what you see, and that is true, but that's true for you. I see what I see, and that is true because it's true for me. And it's really, like Hermeticism trying to rise above the pendulum that is ever swinging left and right, because honestly, I'm getting dizzy of all that swinging.
Yes, it is. It is absolutely dizzy making. That's for sure. And I agree with you. So a couple of things that I thought about is like what you're saying is that, and I went through this as well. Whenever we have a situation like we're facing during the pandemic, it was a really hard time. It was a really hard time. It was really isolating, intentionally so. But during that, and even before that, I was very angry. I was very angry about what I saw as government overreach, about the shredding of the Constitution, about the fact that people didn't seem to care about personal freedom, about the corruption in these institutions, in the legal system, in policing, and every institution that you can name, really. So I was very angry about that. And then I was really angry during COVID, and I was really angry at people that were buying it. And I was black-pilled. I felt very convinced that we had a genocide in the United States right around the corner. And in some ways, I think it could be argued that did happen, but not in the way that I was thinking. And then I finally got to a point when I was like, what are you doing? Like, you're allowing this to affect your life. But there's so much good in the day-to-day that is still left to be appreciated. There's still people, your family, your loved ones, you still have them. My pets, like my home, all these things that are amazing and they're a gift. So I agree with you that we can, and it brings in a little bit of that stoicism philosophy as well, or accepting that. And the 5 stages of grief. Okay, so we can accept that we are in a situation that is really weird. And I don't know, I know we feel like humans have never been here before, but I'm sure that's not true. People have probably felt like the end is nigh. But I think that when we're going through these 5 stages of grief, then we are eventually, hopefully, ideally, we're going to get to acceptance. That does not mean that it has our cooperation or our agreement or our stamp of approval. In the same way, when we lose a loved one or something important to us, we have the stages of grief and we get to acceptance. It doesn't mean that we're glad that they're gone. It means that we understand what happened, and in some way, shape, or form, we have made peace with that. And so I do see an element of that with being able to have quality of life and appreciating what we have in the environment that we find ourselves in. And I do think that that is a principle of Stoicism, that we can acknowledge that it is not great, but we can also acknowledge that we can do what we can do within our realm of influence. And so it's very similar to what you're saying, is that you can let this beat you. You can be a doomer and take the black pill. You can, but we don't have to live that way. Working on things that we want to work on, pursuing our interests, cultivating relationships and meeting new friends, all these things like that give us life. We can make that choice. We can make the choice to learn new skills. We can do that for ourselves. So we still, within the confines of this very weird environment that we find ourselves, we still have a lot of control over our quality of life. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that I think ties in with this, in people that have been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, they will have, of course, different personalities, but the personalities can have different illnesses. And I think, you may be asking, what does that have to do with this conversation? But what I think that indicates is the power of the human mind and human belief, that we have the power to really change our circumstances. And sometimes it just starts here, and I think there's a lot more to be explored with that topic about different illnesses and DID and things like that. But I just want to say that it speaks to the power of the mind, and it ties in with what you're saying as far as dealing with the situation. And we can really decide if we want to live in that, or we can process our stages of grief, accept that we're on an uneven playing field, but we can still have quality of life, and there's still hope for humans. And the other thing too about being angry at other people is that I have really let go a lot of that, because when you were talking about, we can let this poison us. If you're holding on to anger and grudges, whether that is for someone that was in your life or that is for like the entity, the predator class, whatever you want to say, then it is poison to us. So I think that if we can get to acceptance, it can really help lessen that. I don't expect people to love it or be happy with it or anything like that, but there's a lot for us to still pursue that is good, and it's up to us to make that decision every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what you said about DID, have you seen the movie Split with James McAvoy?
I have. Yes, it's been a while.
Man, I have it on my computer. It's one of those movies that I can keep watching. And like, I don't want to fucking fanboy about the movie too much. I'm getting to a point here, but I just think it's so awesome how you like even see him like switch between the personalities. There's one scene that, and I don't know if that's a real thing, but that would absolutely be mental, where like one personality is acting like it's another personality.
You are not evil to me. You were necessary. Dennis, is that you?
They keep calling us the Horde. The others, Miss Patricia and I, we are ridiculed. Now, we're not perfect, but we don't deserve to be ridiculed. We're all struggling. They have to admit that.
Which is absolutely fucking insane, and kind of speaks to the power of the mind, and, also James McAvoy as an actor, because he's known to be very... There are some actors who are like very method actors, and I believe James McAvoy, if he's not a method actor, he's just, his skills are fucking somewhere else. But the power of the mind is so incredibly important, and that's why it's so incredibly important to well, first of all, switch off the news, because that basically is a, lesser form of mind control. They're telling you what is happening according to what the establishment feeds them. They're telling you what to think about it. They're telling you who the aggressor is and who the victim is and everything. And you're really not supposed to question that because they are the established order. And makes me think of other things too. I've recently had a bit of a conversation about that. Cancer patients, for example. It's sorry if it's getting a little dark out there, but there are have been a lot of cancer patients who have lived with it for months, if not years, and weren't aware of it. We're still mostly healthy. I mean, some trouble here and there, but hey, everyone has a bad day. Sometimes we have a bad week, doesn't mean anything. And then it's kind of continuing, it's getting worse and worse. Maybe I should just go to the doctor, have myself checked out. And then it's you got cancer and it's a pretty advanced stage. And then in a matter of months, they're gone. And so the person I was talking about this, they questioned that too. It's should we, is that because they have been told that, it's pretty far advanced and it's terminal, so it got so ingrained in their brain that, I mean, if you want to put it that way, again, apologies for the dark topic, they basically killed themselves with their own mind because they believed that, they weren't gonna make it anyway. And, you have that with pregnancies as well. I've heard stories about women who came into the doctors, a bit of some tummy issues, IBS girly, it happens. And then the doctor says oh yeah, you're pregnant. And they come in flat, flat, tight, good looking. And they come out with, a belly, just like that. Because they were told and shown, of course, that, they were pregnant. So the mind is such a powerful thing, and it's really a matter of what you do with it. It's the the thoughts that you're thinking. It's the beliefs that you're holding. We create our own reality. It's been researched. It's been proven scientifically, if that's something you care about. We create our own reality. That's also why I said that, your truth is true. Your vision is true. What you're hearing is true. My truth is also true. My vision is also true. What I'm hearing is also true, because those are our individual realities. So yeah, the belief that, we both had, that there is, a hard cap on life, and that, people who are cooperating with all of this, even cooperating through negligence, they are the bad guy and they're so incredibly evil. Yeah, it will poison you. You will poison your own mind. But it is these dark times where light is able to shine the brightest. But, put a very dark cap or dark hood over that light, and it's not gonna shine. So yeah, I just wanted to, the power of the mind is incredible, and you should really, pay attention, or I think, we should all pay attention to it more, as think, change, repeat, indeed.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think that a lot of times for us to start to cultivate our awareness is the number one step. So just becoming aware. So this was, as somebody who's working in body work and massage therapy, that would be one of my top coaching tips for my clients that were dealing with pain issues, is to pay attention to how you feel throughout the day. Because oftentimes, and this is, in my opinion, intentional as well, but the tax cattle are kept very, very busy. So they're kept so busy that it makes it difficult for you to pay attention to everything that you really need to pay attention to in a day. And certainly paying attention to how you feel in your own skin is, it sounds like a very basic concept, but people have not been taught to do that. They have not been trained to do that. Like if I'm walking down the street, do I feel a tightness in my right hip and my left shoulder, or, something like that? Or if I'm cleaning the house, do I feel some kind of way? Do I feel pain here, there? Do I feel this pain after I've been driving for a long distance? All of these things, very basic, but it's not basic to you if it hasn't been put on your radar to pay attention to that, to start to cultivate the awareness, not only you in your own body, but for us to be cultivating awareness of what are we thinking about during the day? Where is our thought process going? What are we focusing on? Are we practicing gratitude? And I am not grandstanding or preaching here, because these are all things that I myself need to work on, but it's just on my radar of something that, there's the old saying that the grass grows where you water it. That is our life here in the situation that we find ourselves in. So if you want to put forth effort to becoming a healthier, happier, more well-adjusted person, then that is possible. I'm not saying it's easy. It is a journey for us to, in my situation of feeling like I'm coming into this stage of my life with some dysfunction as far as, maybe how I handle relationships or my own confidence and whatever that may be, like human interaction or just dealing with life in general. But I have the goal of continuing to become a healthier, happier, well-adjusted person. And I work on that. I work on it, and I've been working on it for years. And I do not think that I'm perfect, and I'm trying to have forgiveness for myself whenever I can be very self-critical, all these things. But I think that that is important for us to cultivate awareness and for us to, to keep in mind, if that is your goal, is to become healthier, happier, more well-adjusted, you can get there. You can. We can put down some of the baggage that we carry with us and have a quality of life even in these troubling times. And back on the dissociative identity issue, I don't know about personalities pretending to be other personalities. And what I have read, think that because it's not something that is super, I will say it's well studied, but not from an establishment perspective. There really probably should be a lot more information out there about DID than what we have available to us. And not that I've tried to run down every source on DID. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a ton of info available, but what I've seen. But I do know that sometimes the personalities are not aware of each other. So like maybe your main personality may not even be aware of the alters, but the alters may be aware of the main. So that is normally, we see that in really dark situations where people have been abused very badly, and that it's their survival mechanism to make it through the terrible circumstances in which they find themselves. But the idea that different personalities can have different illnesses is really profound, because that does, coming back to what you were saying as far as the power of the mind and people getting a bad diagnosis, but they were living with it until they were told. Yes, I think that is a huge factor, is for us to, and I'm not saying I'm an expert at this. Like, I think you can harness the power of the mind, but I don't think that it's easy. I do think it can be done. But then that goes with, looking at the placebo effect of X, Y, and Z circumstances. So whether that's medication or a trial or whatever that happens to be, whatever you're told, whatever that placebo effect is, there's something very powerful about that. And I've seen stories of people taking a placebo medication and having the belief that it was helping them. Then they were told this is not medication, and it wasn't a cancer trial, that then it all came back. So there's something absolutely really important for the power of the mind. And I'm not saying you can, if you have lost an arm or something, that you're going to be able to grow that back. In some other circumstances, we can heal ourselves. I'm not saying I've cracked the code on that, but if different personalities can have different illnesses, and I was speaking with one of my friends about this, something that he had seen is like one of the personalities had diabetes, but the others didn't.
That's a very common one. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does that mean? And depending if it's type 1 or if it's type 2, but with type 1 diabetes, it's supposed to be a lack of function from your pancreas with the inability to create the insulin that it needs.
Yeah.
So that's supposed to be autoimmune. So
It's
how,
supposed to be something purely physical. Yeah.
yes. So how do we explain that except for the power of the mind?
Yeah, exactly. And placebos are such a great example. I haven't even thought of that. But, basically, I mean, that is like also pretty much like medical proof of, the power of the mind, that, just taking a sugar pill really and being told like, hey, this is the actual medication. It's that belief that, makes it happen, which is so crazy. And like you've seen it everywhere. I mean, I can remember pop culture. Just in pop culture is a very, there's so much in pop culture that is kind of, hinting at other things. Like I remember one episode of American Dad where one of the agents, I believe it was like the FBI fundraiser episode or something like that, where one of the agents was just this, big, strong guy, broad shoulders, like V-taper, everything. And, he said like, oh, you want to know how I've got this body? It's like, oh, I don't know, like rigorous exercise, heavy lifting. No, I willed this body. I willed it into being. And, I mean, you spoke about like not being able to regrow an arm. Maybe we can. Maybe if you just, I don't know, believe hard enough that it sounds crazy, but if you believe hard enough that you can, maybe you can. I mean, we experience phantom pains, for example, when you have to have your whatever it is amputated for some reason, you can still feel pain in a leg or an arm that is no longer there. So that is your mind fooling you into believing something that doesn't exist. And a very common treatment for, treatment for that is to just fool your mind in another way. Like especially if it's a leg, like hold a mirror to the other leg, so it still looks like you have two legs. And then for some reason, your brain is like, oh, two legs. It's how it's supposed to be. All is well. Pain is gone because, I don't know, all is well now. So just in a medical sense, and the diabetes is a very good example as well. That's supposed to be just, purely physical. It's something, wrong with your organs, autoimmune, something that just can be cured. Really, it can be managed, but it can be cured. So why is it that, another personality doesn't have diabetes?
Yes.
So yeah, we can will everything into being, and just believing something is so incredibly important. That's why I try to say that, it's not I am going to do something, like I'm already doing it, or even, preferably I have already done it. Just, everything else needs to catch up, or, I think I can. No, you don't think you can. You can.
Yes.
And you will. That's
yes.
it.
Yeah. 100%. And on the phantom limb conversation, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that there's some videos out there of somebody having, let's say, an arm or a hand missing, and they do exactly what you said, like set up a mirror box and then massage. Let's say you lost your right hand, but they'll massage the left, and it looks like your right hand is getting a massage, and people will feel relief from that. So it is 100% that and I think that there's so much mystery still left for us to figure out, and a lot of information that we haven't tapped yet. But just on the handful of basic things that we've covered so far shows the power of belief and mindset, and that it's something that we can always get better at. But I'm just absolutely convinced that there is some way to unlock, the mindset as well. When I was thinking about it, especially for people that have maybe autoimmune disorders and things like that, but it's so important, and it's important for just your your own survival, health, and happiness in these troubling times that we find ourselves. And the other thing is that, yeah, we're told that there's no cure for type 1 diabetes, but I believe that, especially with learning about this dissociative identity disorder and the different illnesses, I believe that perhaps there is a cure, and at the very least that it can be managed well. But that's another, an issue that we're running into, is that the medical establishment is not very forthcoming with anything except for the pharmaceutical surgery pipeline overall as an entity. I'm not saying there are not people in those industries that are trying to do the right thing the best that they can, but just overall the entire entity is very corrupted and is not obviously looking out for our best interests. So even if they knew about a cure, they're probably not going to tell you about it. So for all intents and purposes that we know about, we're told that yes, type 1 diabetes cannot be cured. However, I would disagree. If you have different personalities that don't have that disease, something's up. That means there is some way, somehow, for us to kickstart, in this case, the pancreas and our insulin production, all that stuff. I don't know. It's still, there's a lot of mystery there, but I believe that these things are indicative of how much control we actually do have over our, quality of life.
Hey, maybe that is the, part of the junk DNA that we're, always being told about, that there are certain parts of our DNA that, don't seem to have any real function, but they're still there for some reason. Maybe that plays a part in it. Maybe that is like how we unlock, if you will. I always find it kind of weird to like talk in these mechanical terms. It's also why I don't like when people say like, oh, I got this download. It's no, you got an insight. You didn't have a download. You're not a machine. You're not a computer. Stop saying that. PSA for all of you. Stop saying you got downloads. Not a freaking computer.
That's a great point, because I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to say that how we speak does matter. How we think about these things, how we say these things, that absolutely matters. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. That's why I said that, I don't believe I can do things. Like, I know I can do things. I am doing things. Thoughts is one thing, but to like bring it out there in the physical world, that's another thing. And yeah, like maybe that is like the junk DNA, if you will. Although if it's junk, we wouldn't have it. Or, would have been phased out during evolution, or how much of that is even true. That's a whole other discussion,
It's
evolution,
a whole other thing, but yeah,
evolution
I have
versus
my,
adaptation.
yes, yeah, I have my questions and doubts on that. And I think we have to, because there's an official narrative, and we know that is based around Charles Darwin, and that there's some weird stuff about Darwin and his connections and associations, and a lot of the web kind of goes back to the same people that are still writing the script today. So I definitely have questions about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that we, as a society, as a people, we should question everything, even if it's just because we are now told to not question anything. Just take it for what it is. The science is settled. Do not do your own research. Like, we are literally being told these things when the science is never settled. Because that's science, always finding new things, always, trying to debunk itself, really. They real science, if you will. I'm not much of a scientist, but this I know. They're not like taking or what they are doing now a lot is taking a conclusion and finding the road to that conclusion. It's not how that works. You take something that you want to find the answer to. Maybe it's like this. Okay, well, let's start to figure it out. And if we come to a different answer, we come to a different answer. But for some reason, like evolution, adaptation, you're not supposed to question that, because that's been in place for hundreds of years, and it's Darwinism. It's the survival of the fittest, or who can adapt the best. And that's it. So why can't we question that? I mean, there is more to life than just this physical life anyway. So does Darwinism also count for, for the fae folk? Is that also, for the trolls, for the giants, for all the other beings? Does Darwinism go for that as well? Or are we just ignoring all the other layers of reality? Question everything. Fucking question even what we're telling here.
Yeah.
I'm not the arbiter of truth. This is my experience. This is how I view it. This is what I have learned over the last, I don't know how many years, too many. So, fucking question it. If you disagree with me, leave it in the comments. If you agree with me, leave it in the comments. I'd be more than happy to read it. And that's why I always challenge people to, come on the podcast as well. It's like, oh, this is not how it is. It's, like this and this and that. It's like, okay, just come on the podcast. Let's have a discussion about that. No, I don't want to, blah, 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 blah. It's easy, easy making comments, but.
Right. And that's one of the things about doing this, this kind of interaction when you're putting your face and your voice and out there is a vulnerability to that. And I think that sometimes, not everybody, and maybe not even most people, but I think sometimes people don't think about that. But when confronted with come and discuss it with me, then I think they do feel perhaps the vulnerability. And it's not even that it's going to be like a gotcha or a humiliation for that person, just a discussion, but that in and of itself can be challenging for people to take on. But I think that if we have these discussions, that we become better thinkers, because it does challenge what we, what our beliefs are. And if our beliefs are, if we should have them, then they should be able to withstand scrutiny or conversation from somebody who doesn't agree with us or who has questions. And so I think that dialogue with people that we don't agree with, or even listening to some other content creators that we don't always agree with, is healthy for us, because it helps us to really hone in on what do I actually believe about this and why do I believe that? Because even though we are in this kind of situation where we are not wanting to be involved with the political world or the two-party paradigm or whatever is presented to us as these are your choices, when we want to be outside of that, it doesn't mean that everything that we think and believe is correct. And it doesn't mean that some of our ideas were not handed to us by the very think tanks that are involved in the political milieu. So I think that is worth us continuously questioning, why do I think this? And I'm not saying like I question every single thing that I think every single day, but as it comes up, I try to consider these things and sort of peel back the layers of really what I think. And it did start with losing the identifying with the two-party system or believing that voting made a difference. And maybe it does on a local level. I don't know. And I'm not, if you want to vote, do it. But I'm just saying, I began to stop subscribing from those things, but also it was other maybe inherent beliefs that I had that I wanted to peel away. So for example, when I learned about the Milgram experiment, where people were involved in an experiment and they were shocking other people because someone in a lab coat with a clipboard told them to do it based on wrong answers. And that really made me think, would I do that? Would I shock somebody that I don't know for a wrong answer just because I happen to be in this whatever situation? Would I be that person? And I don't want to be that person. I would want to be the person that says, I'm not doing this. So what does that say about me and my belief in authority and my trust in authority, right? So it's small things along the way that help us start questioning and challenging our currently held paradigms. And it was that way with there's a documentary called The Business of Being Born. And believe it or not, this was done by talk show host Ricki Lake. But in this documentary, she goes through her own birthing process and the rise for cesareans, for C-sections, the rise in inducing labor with Pitocin, the administration of an epidural, and I'm not shaming anyone for their process. That's not what this is, but it's just a matter of noting that the former way that people would give birth would be at home with a midwife. Then we have the introduction of Rockefeller medicine, and they began to run a smear campaign against midwives and having home births, and that was associated with being dirty and unclean and whatever. Then we see the pivot to the hospital, the hospital check sheet, basically, of like, you're going in, this is where you're having your child. And then as that continues to evolve, now we have many more cesareans, emergency cesareans, all kinds of things that are interventions that are done. And I'm not saying that they're always wrong, but I'm saying that it's interesting that this has been a change in the way that humans give birth, right? And knowing about the efforts of the Rockefeller medicine in order to get people moving away from home births and delivering their babies with midwives. And so that was another thing that caused me to question what we're being told from a medical standpoint, as far as like recognizing that they have this essentially a checklist, a path that you're going to go down, whether that's with chronic pain. And then for myself, dealing with my own chronic pain issues, and then going through that process with whatever they tell you to do and where that ultimately goes, which is pharmaceuticals and MRIs and CT scans, things like that. And then if they find something that could be operated on surgically, they're going to do that. But just because they do that does not mean that you actually needed that to begin with. And then I saw this with my clients all the time, of people thinking like, oh, well, my knees are killing me. It's bone on bone. And it's like, yeah, but you've never had a massage. So you've never done work to release the connective tissue in your quadriceps. So what if it's that? I'm not saying it is every time, but I'm just saying, like, these are things that people don't necessarily think about or understand. Some doctors will recommend massage therapy, but if you go to a massage therapist who does not have the education or understanding of how important the kinetic chain and connective tissue is, then it still could be a miss for you. Anyway, all of that to say that these are various things that came into my purview of changing my paradigm gradually of these well-worn institutions that I had grown up with and that I believed in, and my own belief or subscription to authority, and really starting to peel back what I thought about that, and then continuing on that journey, still to this day. And that's been years ago, but just always trying to learn and reconsider what I think.
Yeah. I think healthcare-wise, here in the Netherlands or Northern Europe as a whole, we're lucky to have a more socialist kind of healthcare. I just pay a monthly fee and most of it is covered. So we're very fortunate in that. But yeah, I've seen, the kind of videos that, like I just gave birth to my child. I got the bill from the hospital, and it's like, $25,000, please. It's like, say what?
Yes, yes.
And it's for this and for this and for this and for this, and it's like, it's a freaking rap sheet. It's like, and everything has a price. The room and the epidural and the sheets and these doctors and this medicine and that, and for the time that you were there because you were keeping a room occupied, and like, hurry up and give birth already because we need this room. You're costing us money. So yeah, the US is absolutely fucking crazy when it comes to that. So I'm very happy to be Dutch. I'm very happy to be European in that regard. So sorry for all you Americans. You're more than welcome to, come back to the motherlands. A lot have already. Also seeing a lot of those videos, it's like, well, I'm back in Europe. I'm like in the Netherlands or Germany or Belgium, and it's like, things are so much better here. The American dream just, there he goes.
Yeah.
Awakening.
Yeah. And you're right. The medical system here, it's dog eat dog. It is really, really difficult. And even people that have insurance, and there's all of these ways too that are created to make you have insurance and be part of the system, because that's one of the big things with corporate jobs is that it's the benefits. So it is health insurance, it is 401k, things like that, that if you were not, taxed at such an exorbitant rate, then you could plan for your own retirement. You wouldn't need some sort of K system, which was like a pretty new thing. I mean, they had Social Security for a long time, which still exists, but there's a lot of discussions about that being insolvent within a matter of years. Then the introduction of 401k, and you have employer matches and health care, because if you don't have some type of insurance and you have a medical issue, it could easily bankrupt you, or at least give you a huge amount of medical debt that you're left trying to pay off for who knows how long. So it is truly very dog eat dog in that way. And that's one of the things is like, from the libertarian perspective or the anarchist perspective, I don't like socialized medicine. However, I have even come around to say, I'm like, if you stop stealing our money to to have military bases all over the entire world, and you actually spent that money on Americans for healthcare, I would stop. I wouldn't complain about that, right? Because it is the waste that we see is so egregious. At least if that went to some fellow Americans' healthcare, I would feel, a lot better about that. So I don't, overall, I'm not a big socialized medicine person, because I think that there's a lot of things that are done in order to make it as expensive as it is. And that if the system were to be reworked, that it, with mutual aid, that we could figure things out. People are actually generous. Americans are generous. We don't have a reputation for it, but Americans donate a lot of money to charity every year. People GoFundMe. You don't get a tax write-off for GoFundMe or buy me a coffee or any of these things, but people are generous. Like what I was telling you, we did this fundraiser for my friend, and a lot of people didn't know him. We didn't reach our financial goal, but we ended up raising like over $600 or something like that, which was not nothing to him. And that's from people that really didn't know him that well, because they care, because they're generous people. So there is that spirit out there. Anyway, all that to say that if we stopped bombing the entire world, doing black ops and military coups, then and we moved to socialized medicine, I wouldn't complain about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you're well known for that. Some of your presidents have even gotten the Nobel Peace Prize for bombing the shit out of other countries. And it's like, well, I mean, I don't know how exactly that's supposed to be peace, but hey, it's fine. That prize has lost its luster long ago. Like if you're giving
Indeed.
Obama the Peace Prize, who is known to have increased the bombings to, was it like a few thousand, like every hour?
It was something crazy. And basically he's drone bomber. I mean, he was known for that.
Drone bomber, I like that.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. Any kind of Peace Prize nonsense is simply 1984 doublespeak. That's what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also just the in crowds giving each other, the pat on the back, like, attaboy. Same with the Oscars, same with the Golden Globes, it's always the same kind of crowd. It's always the same people that get the awards, or, they have done something to get those rewards, something unspeakable often. So yeah, just, stick to this level of society. I wanna say, like, as a kid, being rich and famous sounds awesome until you learn what you have to do for all of it. And now I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'd like to have this podcast like be a thing that I can, make my money with, or just my channel in general. But I don't have to be rich and famous, just, enough to live a comfortable life. That's good enough for me. And if I'm getting some recognition, then, hey, that's great. But rich and famous, nah. If I look at the rich and famous today, I don't want to be one of them.
Absolutely not. They're some of the most maladaptive people that you could come into contact with, I think. And you're right. A lot of that is based on what they had to do to get there. So I think that there's probably, just like in every industry, but especially like the attention seeking spotlight industry, that there is probably a bell curve. There probably are some people who are genuinely talented. They love the work and they were made for that. And then I think that there's a certain amount of sociopaths. Just like in corporate America, we have heard that sociopaths climb the corporate ladder much faster because they're not constrained like the rest of us with a conscience and ethics and guilt. So we're not willing to stab someone in the back or step on them in order to get a step up. But if you are a sociopath, then they are much more likely to do that. So I definitely think there's a lot of that in the, celebrity world. And then there's other people whose parents are maybe that way and they're using their children as a means to an end. And it quite literally is child sacrifice because they have presented their child to predators in order to try to get rich and famous.
Great example is Jaden Smith, son of Will Smith. Like Will Smith, I used to like him, like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was funny in that shit. He's done some good movies. He's done some fun stuff, but I lost respect for him. I mean, he's a cuck, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And his son, Jaden. Yeah. I mean, of course, Nepo baby, it's easy. Like your father's Will Smith. Of course, you're gonna, bank on that. Honestly, I would too in that situation. It's an easy in, but, seeing how he behaves and the things that he does and like how he dresses himself and holds himself, it's like, oh boy, no, that's the entertainment industry. It's got, they got you. Entertainment industry, it is toxic as shit. And
it's a meat grinder.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so fickle, like famous one day and then dropped the very next. Like how many I see those posts every now and then, like, oh, remember this and that actor. It's like, oh shit, yeah, like they were everywhere like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and then they just kind of, I don't know, dropped off the face of the earth and you don't hear anything from them anymore.
Yeah, because they've outlived their usefulness for whatever reason. So one of the best examples, I think, would be Britney Spears. There's some weird stuff even talked about her in Program to Kill by Dave McGowan. The fact that she had discussed at some point publicly that her and her family used to walk around each other naked. And she was like a young teen at this time, like maybe 13 years old, something like that. And then there was the fact that she started on Disney, and she was part of the Mickey Mouse Club. So she was in the business as a young, an up-and-comer singer, dancer, and in a lot of ways like a JonBenet type character. And then we saw what happened to her. She was very exploited. She was everywhere during, like, in her heyday, absolutely everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then we saw in real time the decline of Britney Spears and seemed to be in, I don't know, addicted to drugs or alcohol or whatever, or displaying signs of mental illness from repeated abuse starting at a very young age. Yeah. So these types of things are possible, and we see it with so many of them. There's Amanda Bynes. There was a kid that I saw recently, a clip of him that had been on one of these shows, maybe a Disney or Nickelodeon show, and he was just out on the streets in LA, and he was completely like wearing dirty clothes, and he was living on the streets, and he was drug addicted. And
yeah, the latest one that was like from like Ned's School Guide or something, like another one of those.
That's it.
Another one of those Nickelodeon shows. I was going to bring that up. Yeah. Like, he used to be such a goofy character on the show, and now he is a homeless drug addict in LA. It's like from the heights to, the height of the heights, being a child actor, which is, I mean, like I said, he was a funny character. He wasn't really like one of the main characters, but still main cast. And now he's, drug addicted, homeless.
Yeah.
One of his former co-stars, the guy who played Cookie, I don't know why I remember those names. As soon as he, tried to to help him clean his act up. And for as far as I know, he didn't really succeed, unfortunately.
Yeah. It
So
sounded like this guy had gotten him a hotel room and he ended up trashing the hotel room, and yeah,
that was it. Yeah, which is so sad, but I mean, such a common story with child actors, especially the ones working under the mouse,
Yes, 100%. And so many cases of that where kids have been, I think for a society that would never approve of child sacrifice, there's a lot of child sacrifice. And that would be one of them, obviously, would be essentially whoring your child out for entertainment because you wanted to live vicariously through them, or you wanted to make money from them, whatever. And that was the case really we've seen it over and over. Michael Jackson was an example. Whether you believe a lot of the allegations about Michael Jackson in his later life, I've been up and down, back and forth on that issue. But one thing is for sure, he was in a highly controlled and abusive home, particularly at the hands of his father, Joe Jackson. So the abuse of these children is very, very common. And we even hear this with Judy Garland when she was on The Wizard of Oz, they had her on cigarettes and coffee and yes, for her weight. They wanted her looking younger. We have Shirley Temple, who was entertaining grown men as a little girl. That's presented to us as being innocent. So when I was a kid and I saw Shirley Temple, I was like, she's so adorable. But then when looking at it through a new lens, then you see, wow. And then there's a lot of stories about the treatment that these people got. So it really has been a dark industry from the beginning. But that, in my opinion, is one form of child sacrifice. Or I think in some cases, overzealous parents pushing sports on their children is also child sacrifice. I have my questions about CTE, but I'm not sure how familiar you are with that. But essentially, many years ago,
pretty familiar.
Okay,
I'm a big pro wrestling fan, and concussions are a big thing in pro wrestling as well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Chris Benoit case is a very infamous one.
Yes, it is. Exactly. So we're on the same page with this stuff. And of course, the first time that we officially heard about that, unless you were pretty well tracking, I guess, the local news out of Pennsylvania, but it was the former Steelers football player, Mike Webster, I believe. And he was in his mid 50s. So he was young, and he had been presenting like he was living basically in his car. His marriage had fallen apart. He was doing drugs, behaving erratically, and his family did not understand. So then he has the autopsy that's done by this, what we're told, a small time. I don't know. I don't know if that would be the coroner or the pathologist. Either way, he discovered the presence of these specific plaques in a specific place in the brain, and that led him to diagnose CTE. And apparently he had a very difficult time getting that information out. It was very suppressed, and we know there's a ton of powerful interest in football, college football, professional football. There's so much money that's made there that they thought people would stop sacrificing their kids to football if they really understood the damage that it could do. And that's one of the things that I think now is knowing what we know about the concussions and brain injury and chronic, what is it? What is CTE? Chronic, I don't know. I'm blanking, but
let me look it up real quick. I'm curious. I've always just,
I think it's chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Yeah,
but I'm not 100% sure. Okay.
Yeah, that's wow. Chronic traumatic
encephalopathy, I think.
Yeah.
So that was something that was not on the radar. Now it is. Now people are still allowing their young children to play tackle football at young ages. So that's one of the things that I consider to be a form of child sacrifice in a way. I think that there are progressive parents that are pushing the gender narrative on their children in order to say that I have a non-binary child or a trans child or that kind of thing. I consider that to be a form of child sacrifice. I don't think they always know about it or realize that that's what they're doing. In some cases, maybe they think they're doing the best thing, but ultimately, if we step back, how can it be good for you to put your child on puberty blockers that we do not know the long-term consequences of this, the rest of the medication that they end up taking? And then particularly if you get into the surgical aspect of this, your child, not only are you essentially participating in a eugenics campaign because you're making sure that your child will never be able to bear children in any way, shape, or form, but they're also now a lifelong member of the pharmaceutical pipeline and the medical industrial complex pipeline. So that, to me, is another form of modern day child sacrifice that we see so often. So there's unfortunately, there's so many children that are, that are eaten up by the meat grinder, whether that's through the entertainment or sports or even some, gender ideology, however you want to say that. These are very common things that we see in today's day and time. And a lot of Hollywood people, we hear about the kind of the things that they get involved in or that they're required to do. And oftentimes when we're looking at cases of abuse, it is generational.
Yeah.
That's so often there's a theme there, but their children are also seemingly exposed to that as well. So,
and very often a lot of military connections.
So often there are military connections. And speaking of, that's a situation with JonBenet Ramsey. Very clear-cut example. You were probably, I don't even know if you were born, because I think you and JonBenet would have been about the same age. So she died in 1996. But there's so much about this story that people wanted to know the answer about JonBenet for many, 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 many years, ever since we found out about that Christmas of 1996. And yet, no one's ever been arrested. No one's ever been caught. No one's ever stood trial. And we don't know the truth about that situation. But in the following years, a lot of weird connections have been made with the Ramsey family. So John Ramsey he's said to basically be part of his own business, but actually it was Access Graphics that was a subsidiary at that time of Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin was in the Littleton, Colorado area, which my understanding is that it employs about, or at least around then, about like 30% of the people that lived in that area. In that area, we also had the Columbine school shooting. And we also had after that, the Batman movie theater shooting with James, I cannot remember his last name off the top of my head, but there's a lot of odd things in a military contractor town. And then it goes even further back with at least Patsy Ramsey's father. He was involved in, Big Chemical, and then he was involved with Access Graphics. And so, like you're saying, there's so often in Hollywood, there's the military connections. In music, there's military connections. In major sports, there's military connections. Who puts on the big show, the big pomp and circumstance, and jets flying over, and military advertising? That's in the UFC as well. So
absolutely. And the whole like child grooming thing, especially in sports, where you're talking about football. The movie, I believe it's a fairly new movie, came out either last year or the year before, about that American football player.
I have not seen that one. Yeah,
it's a very good movie, absolutely. But man, it is showing you things. Like it is not ashamed to show the picture of the kitty, of course.
Yeah, well, one of my other cats came and snuggled with him, and so they're just in a bed right beside me on my desk, and
that's cute.
It's very sweet.
No, but it's, blood transfusions, is mind control, is sacrifice, is handlers, signing your soul to the devil type stuff. It's just everything, really. Being groomed from a very young child to, love football and eventually become this pro baller. The path has been laid out for him pretty much since the day he was born, like he had no choice. I mean, of course, the child grows up believing that, it is a choice and they're just, making their father proud, which is
Right.
from the child's perspective, child's innocence, really. This is like both in the movie and real life. Of course, they're just trying to make their parents proud. Cause that's what you want as a kid.
Yes.
You want to see
So
your
often.
parents happy. You want to,
Yes.
to have them be proud of you. So that's why you do those things, because, mommy wants me to do those things. Daddy wants me to do those things.
So often that's the case. Yes. I have not seen that movie, but I have to add it to my list to watch pretty soon because I am interested in these types of things. And this also goes with, a lot of the things that we hear about, we don't necessarily have hard and fast proof. We have patterns that we can recognize that align with what we know about generational abuse, behaviors, industries, things like that. But I think that a lot of this stuff is presented to us. And why is that? Is that to blur the lines between what you may hear in, quote, reality versus what you see on the screen? Is it a matter of trying to gain acceptance for some of these things? Is it...
I think it's a little bit of both. That's another thing that I recently talked about on the Esoteric Archives about fantasy. Like, are they putting those things in fantasy so that, when those things are happening or seemingly happening and you're calling it out, everyone's just telling you like, oh, you're watching too many TV. You're reading too many books.
Right. So as a tool to dismiss people and what you see before your very eyes. Yeah. I think that's possible.
That was in a movie, like that was a movie that you watched and it's, you must have mistook it for something else. No, like I've seen this shit happening. Nah, you're watching too much TV.
Yes. Yep. And something that I think about too quite a bit is that why is it being shown to us? So there's clearly a reason with that. But then the other thing is like, where do these ideas come from? Where does the imagination come from? It's coming from somewhere. So a lot of these things maybe are based or loosely based on actual events or on mythology, but even mythology, where did these stories come from? So my opinion is that if you're seeing something from like a mythological perspective or in the movies or in literature or fiction or whatever you want to say, there are reasons for the human storytelling history and what we're presented. There are reasons for that. From the why is it being shown to you, but where did it come from as well? So I have to think that in a lot of these cases, it may be complete hyperbole, but that doesn't mean that there are not elements of truth that are being shown to us as well, even in the form of an entertaining, made up show.
You should read the works of Carl Jung. I know I bring him up like pretty much every show, but I love his work. One of my favorite things is on the archetypes.
Yes.
His work on the archetypes, his work on collective consciousness, his work on is it like synchronicities and all of that. Very, very fascinating. Jung and also his mentor Nietzsche. That's two incredibly fascinating mystics, philosophers, if you will. Their work is very indicative and it's a lifting of the curtain, especially archetypes. As a polytheist, as a pagan, I do see like my gods being based on those archetypes, or they are a representation of those archetypes. For example, entertainment works in the same way. You have the archetypes, of course, in every movie.
Time.
Yeah,
every time.
You got the bad guy, journey. You got the good guy. Yeah, the hero's journey, another one of those filled with just archetypes and archetypical stuff and everything. And people are like, I'm expecting a few packages, but they can wait. So yeah, just for everyone who is very interested in that, read Carl Jung, read Nietzsche, really do. It'll show you a lot.
Yeah. And I think having these frameworks, even if we don't always believe with them or believe what they're saying or subscribe to their particular belief, I think it's healthy for us to expose ourselves, back to the beginning of our conversation, to these types of thinkers, because there are even if you don't subscribe to everything, there are going to be these nuggets of truth that you can use to inform your worldview and understand what we're seeing take place in front of us. And that is something that I think is really important is, yes, the archetypes. And where do these ideas and these themes come from? Like there's something woven throughout the human story from the beginning that these things are important. So, and I do think additionally that the idea of child sacrifice does tie in. So we see that that has been done in so many ways, you know, historically, but not in the way that we see overtly today. But it still exists. And I find it to be very interesting that we live in this like society that would say, oh no, we don't subscribe to that, but you do subscribe to that in a lot of different ways. And even as like just letting your kid have free reign on the internet in a way is that because you are, you know, keeping them busy. They're doing something that they like to do. You're getting some time, some quiet, peace, whatever you want to say. But unless you're being extremely careful about paying attention to what your child is being exposed to, then you are risking them being exposed to some really terrible things.
The situation with Roblox, for example, like we saw recently.
Yes, and some of the Discord stuff and some of, you know, like Elsa.
Discord is it's a cesspit.
Yes, and Elsagate that came out before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was on YouTube Kids.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So even if people think that it's YouTube Kids, but you don't know what content is being curated for your child. So this is where we get into the, you know, really a spiritual element of the algorithm and how that has been designed, right? And specifically, kind of what we talked about at the very beginning before we even started recording, we have very powerful people that are very interested in human behavior. And it is not because they have your best interests at heart. It is because they want to know every single thing about every single person. They're taking the data. They are manipulating behaviors with the algorithm, not only through our food, the healthcare system, through politics, through television, but the algorithm is such an important key to what we're seeing right now. And that the algorithm is what is contributing to circle fully back to the beginning of our conversation of people seeing the exact same thing, but having a completely different opinion about what they are actually witnessing. And we know that if there's some video out there that the tech oligarchs want to be squashed, it will be immediately. And when there is something that they want to make sure that everybody, including your kids, see it, it will be. So whenever we saw what happened with Charlie Kirk, I had a friend call me the following weekend, because I think this was on a Thursday or Friday, and I talked to her on maybe a Saturday. She was crying. And she was really upset. And I guess she was kind of a fan of his, but also just like, what does this mean? Because clearly this was a mass trauma event, intentionally so. Her 13-year-old child also saw the video and he was crying. That is not because they didn't want kids seeing it. They wanted everybody seeing it. So this is another thing where, and I think that it's almost like, when we were talking a little bit too about the black magic element, this is combining all of these things. It is combining everything that they know about behavioral patterns and manipulating human behavior, which they've been working on at least since the 40s, but probably a lot longer than that. And the amount of progress that they were able to make through their program, MK Ultra, and all the subsidiaries underneath that. All the other programs that they ran that facilitated providing information for them, such as the Phoenix program in Vietnam. This was a torture and a terror campaign that was run against the people that were helping the Viet Cong. And so this has been building and building and building. And then with the introduction of smartphones, internet, all of that stuff, all the data that they're gathering, they are experts at manipulating human behavior. And that is where we are. So that this is where, and it's a form of, in my opinion, black magic and trickery, but it also, you're not only getting people to argue about what is objective reality and what do I see and what do you see, and causing people to hate each other. The old adage, divided we fall, right? because we never will agree on who the enemy is, the predator class or whatever, because we're fighting with each other about X, Y, and Z issue. And so there's just this element of really black magic involved in manipulating. And then there's the other thing that I'm not super well versed in this, but neuro-linguistic programming, right? So when we have something, a phrase, a term, something put into the zeitgeist by somebody that's in a, quote, position of power, why are you hearing that? It's important to them that you hear it. Whether you agree or you don't agree, you reject it completely, doesn't matter. You heard it. You saw it. That matters.
And that is not even, to mention memes and mimetic warfare,
Exactly.
which has also been a thing of all ages, really, going as far back as like even Mesopotamian, Babylonian times, that, mimetic magic, mimetic warfare was already a thing.
Yes.
Over an hour and a half. I am loving this conversation. Thank you very much for this conversation. I absolutely loved the flow of it. And yeah, where can the good people find you? Where can they find more of these amazing thoughts, amazing spin?
Thank you so much. I have loved our conversation too. I know I was like pushing it a little bit on time, but I was really enjoying talking to you, and I appreciate you having me on. Like you said, we've talked about this it's been quite many months. So they can find me. I'm over on X at think_change_2. People could always email me, ThinkChangeRepeat@gmail.com if they want to. Also, I'm on the Knights of the Storm on Rumble at 2 p.m. Eastern every Saturday. And that's a little bit different because that is an ensemble. So there's 3 of us usually that may be either talking about current events or talking to someone. So it's a little bit different than what we're talking about now, but that's still out there. And then also if anyone happens to be interested in the Vietnam War, I did an episode with Wheezy on What is Truth podcast. He's on Spotify, Rumble, other places, but we did a deep dive several weeks ago about Vietnam. So check that out, because that, in my opinion, is one of the cornerstone events to what we see today for a million different reasons. And maybe we can talk about that sometime if you're ever interested.
I'll make sure to listen to that episode. Vietnam was such a huge deal. Really, it's changed so much in Western society as a whole. So I'll make sure to listen to that. I'll of course, make sure that all your details on all the platforms are in the description down below, and that they are in the show notes. I want to make sure that my guests are well represented as well.
Thank you.
Because it has been over these, 48 months of podcasting, 48 to like 60 months of podcasting now. That I have learned so much from my guests, and I don't think I would know half of what I know now, or understand even half of what I understand, if it wasn't for all my guests. And of course, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening once more to this amazing episode of the Greyhorn Pagans Podcast. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you're listening to this on Spotify. Speaking of algorithms, make sure to give it a 5-star rating. It's a small effort, but helps us out so much. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, leave us a, review, I believe. It's what they do on Apple Podcasts. I'm not a big Apple fan. The tech, that is. I like the fruit, not the tech. If you feel like supporting us a little more than just liking, sharing, subscribing, go to our Patreon, patreon.com/GreyhornPagans, where I have several tiers with all kinds of bonus material, early access, and of course the Greyhorn Book Club, where we are currently reading The Night Side of the Runes, Uthark, Adoruna, and the Gothic Kabbalah. Very interesting book. Or very simply become a channel member. I have perks here on YouTube as well, and bonus material and all of that. So yeah, with all of that said, thank you very much. Until next time, bye-bye. This was yet another amazing episode of the Greyhorn Pagans Podcast. We thank you all for watching. We thank you all for listening. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you will be notified whenever we upload something new. Support us on Patreon for early access and for everything else that we do with the tribe, for everything else that we do with the podcast. Find us on www.greyhornpagans.com. For now, we thank you, and until next time.